Would you be prepared to hear your daughter has an aggressive, non-favorable cancer that's going to be hard to beat? My daughter Marisa had headaches, and about 2 years ago, we went to a neurologist to see what these headaches were. And he told us that she had something called Chiari malformation. We had to see a specialist in New York City, Columbia Presbyterian, but I didn't have insurance for New York. I only had New Jersey insurance. So God's timing was great because I called my insurance company and they said it's a blessing because today was the last day to change your insurance. So we could use this doctor in New York City. And that was so important. So when we got to New York City, Dr. McCann and Marisa just hit it off right away. They clicked. And he donates to her Christian college 7 hours away at Liberty University. And they just started talking sports, and he reviewed her case, and after talking to a few surgeons, he said 2/3 of the doctors would do surgery in her skull, but he asked us to trust him, and he had a gut feeling not to do the surgery, and we would watch her really closely for the next year and see how she does to see if there's any problems. So a year goes by, and we went back on January 7th, and he said, just for the heck of it, let's just do an MRI of her entire spine just to make sure that her spine's okay for not doing the surgery. And he says he never normally does that, but because we were watching her. Well, there it was. On the bottom of her spine, there was this large tumor called a gangrenoma. It was wrapping around her organs. It was wrapping around her vena cava, and it had to be biopsied. I remember when they were going to wheel her away, I was scared. And I closed my eyes, and I thought I can control God. And I said, please let me be in the bed and her be standing over me when I open my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, she was still in the bed and I was still standing there. As a mother, you always want to switch places with your kids, and you can't control what God's doing. And that's it. I wasn't in control. And I remember waiting for the biopsy results, and I was not sleeping. I had insomnia for like 7 days. I couldn't eat. All I would do was cry. And I wasn't really trusting God to help me. One night at 3 a.m., I got up and I went in my bathroom, went into the closet, and I got on my knees. At this point, I wasn't crying for her. I was crying for me. And I begged God just to help me because I couldn't take it anymore. And I just asked him to please help me to get through this. And that was the moment, like this overwhelming peace came over me. And I really heard Jesus say he was going to help me and he was going to save her. And at that moment, it was like I just trusted him. And my friend Linda gave me Isaiah 41:13 to hang on to. And it was, I am the Lord your God. I am holding your right hand. Do not fear. I will help you. I slept that night. I completely surrendered myself to him helping me. Marisa's biopsy came up negative for cancer, so she's back in school, and Dr. McCann was going to prepare this team to take out the tumor. By the time the surgery came around, there was 20 doctors in this room. We had to have a surgeon who removes tumors, and we had to have a surgeon who protects the nervous system. We had to have a spine doctor because it was attached to the bottom of her spine. So he had to remove it from her spine. So it was a team, and I didn't know where to go. He put the whole thing together, and he didn't even charge me for it. He just did the whole thing. And I think his connection with her through Liberty and being a Christian, and he just connected with her. He was an instrument for God. The surgery took 7 hours, and it was actually 2 to 3 hours less than they had planned, so they were all excited. They left a piece of the tumor in her. It was wrapped around her vena cava, and it would have been life-threatening to trying to remove it, and it wasn't cancer, so removing it wasn't worth the risk. Marisa wrote this in her blog post before we got the news. In this type of situation, it's easy to ask, why me? But I don't want to look at it that way. I would be nothing without my faith in God and his promises. And I'm sure I wouldn't have gotten through this without him. I know it's not over, and maybe there's even worse to come. Worse to come? We were there just to check in her incision, and we were going to go out and celebrate. And that's not what happened. The surgeon had to look at me and say, I've never seen one of these before in an adult. A rare, aggressive cancer that's going to be hard to beat. A lot of the doctors, they were pretty scary and negative, and they said, it's probably had spread. It's been in her for a long time. This cancer goes after the bone marrow, and be prepared. I'm really dreading the fact if it's in her bone marrow, because that's going to be really hard to beat. I was really scared, but Marisa wasn't afraid. God was really protecting her thoughts. And she said, Mom, when I'm all done with this, I'm going to get Jeremiah 29:11 tattooed on my shoulder. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. You know, with all the workups, everything came back negative. It hadn't spread. And even one executive director of oncology said it's a miracle that it hasn't gone after her bone marrow after all this time. Now we just have to have an oncologist to see what's next. So we went to 4 different hospitals to find the right one. And Jesus just really helped us, because when we were at the wrong one, we just knew it and we had an uneasy feeling, and it was almost like, get out of there. And a friend of mine connected us with this oncologist who her daughter having cancer, and it was really a God connection. And I really, really have a great peace with this doctor. He's a world expert. The oncologist recommended this proton therapy, which is a pinpointed type of radiation that radiates this to tumor site, and they have to have physicists to map out exactly where the tumor was cut from, because there was cancer cells on the cuts. So that piece that they left in there, they had to radiate that whole site, make sure they got out all the cells without causing any damage to any of her other organs. One day when I was at church, I asked Pastor Brad, and I said, why is it that I felt Jesus' presence so much when I was going through this, but I don't feel it normally every day? And he said, it's because it's like when your earthly father is with you every day and you know he's there. And when you're about to get in a car accident and he steps on the brakes, he holds you back so to protect you, and you feel your father's hand on you. And that's exactly how I felt, was that he was holding me back and protecting me. And I felt that presence so strong. People say in times of troubles, where is God in the situation? You know, I felt like he was in the people around me. You know, the doctors and the nurses who were helping me, in my family and my church, people that were praying for me, and in the neighbor that was walking my dog, and my friends that were helping me with my kids. You know, he's there. He's working. He's helping us. I can't explain why God saved Marisa. He promised her hope and a future. And I believe he gave our family a great mercy and a miracle. If she didn't make it, I would be devastated, but I would still trust Jesus. Regardless of the outcome, we're all going to be together in heaven someday. And Jesus used this miracle so that, from Jeremiah 29:11, that she can have a hope and a future to help other people. And like today, she's on the rotation at the hospitals, and she's praying with people that have been through it, and she has a great empathy for them. And I know that God is going to use her greatly to help other people. The person who was being afflicted was helping me through my trial. The Spirit was speaking to me through her blog post. And I printed it out, and I must have read it 1,000 times. We cannot understand the peace the trust in Christ gives us, but we do know without a shadow of a doubt that it is the truest, most real thing we have ever experienced. And she wrote, God will always be with you in situations. He will reveal himself to you if you just look for it. And when you look back on the situation, maybe a week, a month, a year, or 5 years later, you will see the strategic way he was working in your life at that time. You will get through it, I promise. No matter how big the challenge is, nothing is too big for our God to handle. Trust him, because he knows what he's doing, and he loves you enough to give his life for you. I now know what I always knew. Jesus will be there for me. I'm not alone.